welcome to our webinar on public procurement that we are arranging today here at Hanaholmen and together with SNS and the Swedish Embassy. This is the launch event of the SNS Public Policy Report for 2022 that we are launching today here in Finland. My name is Johanna Hannes, and I will act as the moderator for this webinar today. And first, I would like to welcome on stage our very own CEO, Gunvor Kronman, to say a few welcoming words. So please, Gunvor, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Johanna. Really warm welcome from me as well to this annual event that we've been organizing with SNS and with the Swedish Embassy in Finland for many more years than I can remember. It's a very important report annually that is launched in Sweden, commenting on Swedish economic policy or a specific societal phenomenon. And often we have seen that the research done by SNS in Sweden is also relevant in a Finnish context. And that's why we have chosen to annually present these reports, but to add a Finnish angle. And I'm happy also to tell you that we have three very prominent commentators from Finland commenting on this year's report. The theme of the report this year is public procurement. And as we know, both in Finland and Sweden, a big part of the public spending actually is done in this field. And with the increasing outsourcing of tasks in our societies, in the public sector, good handling of procurement processes is more and more important. Also, the findings, I think, and the conclusions in this report from SNS carry interesting relevance also in a Finnish context. And I'm happy that we have the main author of the report with us from Sweden today, Sofia Lundberg, who's the chair of the annual SNS Economic Policy Council this year. She's also the dean of Umeå School of Business, Economics and Statistics at the Umeå University. And as Finnish commentators, we have Tarja Sinivuori-Bolt from the Ministry of Finance, Senior Financial Advisor, and also Program Director of Hankintosuomi. We have Mr. Janne Tukiainen, Professor of Economics from the University of Turku, and he's also the Associate Research Professor at VATT, Institute of Economic Research here in Finland. And last but not least, we have Mr. Antti Raimovaara from the private health company Mehiläinen Oy. He's the account director in charge of healthcare services for the public sector. With these very short welcoming words, I would like to continue giving the stage to the Swedish ambassador to Finland, Nicola Clase, please. Hopefully she's with us here today.
I think we have a small problem today with Nicola's presence. They are experiencing some technical problems, so unfortunately Nicola Clase is not with us right now. But if we can have her online later on, she could maybe say a few ending words at the end of the webinar.
Okay.
So before I let the word over to Sofia Lundberg, who will be presenting the report, I would just like to ask the audience or encourage the audience to also ask questions. In the chat box, you can type your questions and comments, and then at the end of the webinar we will have a short discussion, and there is a possibility then to ask questions. So I will read the questions to the speakers. So please do engage in the discussion and ask questions in the chat box. Now, let me introduce then Sofia Lundberg, who will be presenting the report. Please, Sofia, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me and presenting the report. And I'm really looking forward to the comments from Janne and Tarja and so forth. I will try to share my screen then. Hope it will work. So I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the topic then, as said, is public procurement with a special focus on economics. So it's parting from the economics field, but with also a legal touch, I would say, because we have to consider the institutional prerequisites that governs public procurement. I'm not alone. I have had with me 3 researchers in the writing of the report, and that is Malin Arve from NHH in Bergen, Mats Bergman from Södertörn University, and both Malin and Mats are also in the field of economics. But to support the legal approach of the report, we have also a professor in law, and that is Lars Henriksson at the Swedish School of Economics in Stockholm. So the 4 of us have been collaborating in the writing of the report. The aim of the report then, the assignment that was given to us from SNS was to kind of take public procurement in the kind of broad picture sense, from A to Ö in Swedish. and we can think that the main aim is to put light on the challenges and opportunities in public procurement. It is, as said, an economic analysis, but it touches upon the legal framework. And since we approach a broader audience in our writing, we also have had the aim to provide some examples from practice and add also the data available to illustrate potential problems and opportunities. And the data sources are several, and I will mention them as we go along in the presentations. The specific questions that we have tried to address in the report is, why do we see that public procurement sometimes at least become more expensive than expected, or result in lower quality than planned or asked for in the contract? Why do public authorities sometimes purchase goods and services they should have produced in-house, and the other way around as well? Why do they not purchase goods and services that could have been bought from the market and instead produce them in-house? And why do we now and then see reports from both the procuring side but also from the potential supplier side that public procurement is perceived as complicated, complex processes? In the report, we provide recommendations for practitioners, and we think of practitioners as those that are involved in working with public procurement, but they are equally, I think, relevant for the potential suppliers. And also some recommendations for regulators, those that we think own the question of changing the law actually, or influencing the EU directives governing public procurement, because we think that there are some issues related to the legal framework in Sweden, but also on the EU level. What is it all about? Why do we even have to care about public procurement, writing a report that we have done? Well, if everything was certain, if we know everything about quality and price, no uncertainty at all, it would be very, very easy to write perfect contracts, and we could kind of regulate everything to perfection, and most likely end up in deliveries that also matches the demanded quality and price. But as I think all of us know, that is not the case in real life. Uncertainty, well, with respect to demand conditions, production environment, and delivery is unavoidable and has implications in terms of both quality and costs. So uncertainty is to be expected when it comes to both quality and costs. The big question is kind of how do we deal with it? So we can expect information to be incomplete. We can expect information to be asymmetric between potential suppliers, in between them, but also, of course, between the supply side and the demand side. And the big question is then, how do we deal with this to kind of try to prevent that to have unexpected undesired effects on cost and quality? And if I already now should say something about our conclusion in the report, well, the conclusion answers the question, is there potential for improvements in both the legal framework and in practice? And the answer to that question is yes, there is definitely scope for improvements. Do we have a problem? Well, if we just look at some data, as an economist, I kind of like the data supported conclusions. The Confederation of Swedish Enterprise, Svenskt Näringsliv in Swedish, annually ask the supply side businesses in Sweden about what they think about the business climate in Swedish municipalities, and one or two of the questions relate to public procurement. One of them is that they are asked to kind of rate how they perceive public procurement. Is it functioning or not, on a scale from 1 to 6. 1, 2, 3 are negative values, 4, 5, 6 are positive values, from really poor grade to excellent. And as you can see, the average rating of the public procurement is, well, it's declining and it's not high. So this kind of indicates that there is some, well, they are not pleased with how public procurement is functioning at the municipal level. And the share of positive responses, 4 to 6, is in the other diagram here to the right of my screen. And as you can see, again, the trend is declining, and well, it's less than 30% of all the respondents on average that gives the public procurement in their municipality a positive rating. With that said, we don't know if the respondents to the survey are winners of public contracts or even participate in public procurement, but it's some kind of an indicator anyway of what they think about it. In the surveys, we could also see that, well, in the open questions, they explained their negative responses with that they think there's a lack of competence on the buyer side. They think there's too much focus on price in the supplier selection process. They think that overall the procurements are designed or organized in a way that makes it difficult for small and medium-sized enterprises. Some indicate, and this is in the order of ranking, less frequent, but among the answers, some indicate some sort of corruption. They kind of, the authority already know who they want before they go to procurement, so it's already set, and it's just the public procurement process doesn't matter at all. And they think that the processes are very complex as well, which of course is connected to the difficulties for small and medium-sized enterprises as well. In the report, as said, we had some examples. We have one, for example, from the Stockholm County, where they bought consumables, medical supplies for at-home care. Just to give you, I will not go into the examples in detail because I don't have time for that. But what we kind of, but put the spotlight on this was, there was a lot of media horse in 2016 about stockings, medical stockings being very, very much expensive, 6,000 Swedish kronas per pair. And what we could see when we kind of digged into this procurement was that there was a huge difference between the winning bid and the actual reimbursement to the winner. The cost on the public procurement side, on the authority side, the bid was 99 million, and the cost in the end was about 4 times as high as that, which kind of raises questions. And we also had an example from where I am from, a very, very nice bridge for pedestrians. I like it a lot. What I don't like is that the price ended up to be about 3.5 times the winning bid in the end. And uncertainty, as said, should be expected, especially when you build a complex task, a complex thing like a bridge, but 3.5 times higher price. Well, it raises, as said, questions. Is it reasonable? The background then, as already in the introduction said, a significant amount of money, tax funders' money, is invested in public procurement. In Sweden, it's about 18% of the gross domestic product. It concerns delivering of very, very essential goods and services that the public sector needs to provide, for example, healthcare services. It definitely is important for the potential suppliers, for the businesses in Sweden. In some cases, it might even influence the kind of survival rate for the individual firm. And when we look at public procurement, we were also interested in do the kind of legal framework indicate the kind of right incentives or the right objectives on behalf of the public sector. And if we look into the kind of directives, the public procurement directives, or even the Swedish law, we think that this is kind of a part of the problems that we see, that the objective for public procurement is not to create kind of prerequisites to achieve value for money or economic efficiency. It's about the basic principles to further trade within the European Union. That is very central to the public procurement. I think a little bit in contrast to the antitrust legal framework, for example, which has a much more stronger focus on economic efficiency. So the supply side, if you look at the legal text, the supply side is in focus and the basic principles to further trade. If you ask me as an economist, what do I think should be the objective for public procurement? Efficiency, of course, because that will be kind of give the best value for money. That would kind of protect both the supply and the demand side and the taxpayer with, of course, quality in focus, a match between demand and delivery. So what we would like to find is the supplier with the lowest cost to deliver the contract at, of course, a given quality. That is kind of the whole point with organizing a bidding competition for the public contract. So that is partly, we think, a part of the problem. If we look at what is happening in practice, some numbers again, we can see in Sweden that if you look at the diagrams that I have on the slide, that the public procurement share of GDP has been, well, relatively stable. You have to bear in mind that in 2014, we increased the maximum level for direct purchases, which explains the kind of trend shift in 2014. But we can see that the published call for tenders are decreasing since 2014, which is partly, of course, explained by the increased maximum for direct purchases. But in combination with that, the value per call for tender is increasing. We kind of think that this is kind of an indication of a focus on administrative scale opportunities rather than designing the public procurement auctions in order to stimulate competition and entry from, for example, small and medium-sized enterprises. We, in the report, would really like to be clear and try to be clear about that. It's not that we don't want public procurement to be regulated, but it should have the kind of efficient regulation. Of course, we need to have a regulation that prevent, for example, corruption and nepotism, but we would like to see a regulation that is more strongly related to economic efficiency as well. And although, and especially in the Swedish context, and here I think there's a difference actually between Finland and Sweden, we have chosen to regulate, for example, public procurement below the threshold values in Sweden. We have also kind of put even more weight on the sustainable development issues in the legal framework related to public procurement. But despite the relatively detailed regulation, we think that there is some scope for strategic leeway for public authorities to start with, to organize a public procurement or choose to have it in-house. And then there's a lot of things that are not regulated. For example, the decision to divide the public procurement auction into lots, whether or not to put everything into one big single public procurement auction or divided into separate tender processes, the details of the contracts, the evaluation criteria and supplier selection method, use of reservation prices and subcontractors, etc. There's a lot of questions that actually can be chosen that are not regulated in the legal framework. And I will not go into detail, but based on economic theory, we can give some kind of hands-on advice on the decision to procure or not, because that's where it all starts. The legal framework will only kick in if you choose to procure. If you don't have to follow the. If you're in-house, you're in-house, and if you're in-house, you have full control over quality, so to speak, as well. So the decision to procure or not should be based on the degree of contractability, which relates to the uncertainty about price and cost. If, well, what you procure is within your core competence as authority or not. If it is, you should not procure it. And the degree of specialization, are you buying standardized products or specialized products, and so forth. That is all in the report. The report is organized in accordance with the procurement process as the Swedish Authority for Public Procurement defines it, Upphandlingsmyndigheten. So we look at the preparation and planning phase, give advice on that. We look at the implementation phase where the actual procurement auction is organized, and then what is happening within the realization phase when the contract is actually when the delivery is happening. In the planning and preparation phase, we, based on economic theory, practice, numbers, and so forth, give the following conclusions or advice to practitioners. This is a phase where you really should invest your time, we think, because it's really important. What you do in the planning phase will definitely affect what happens in the delivery phase. You should aim for a high number of bidders, although you should be aware a little bit of what is called winner's curse. We also elaborate a little bit about that not everything should be procured. For example, the core competence, which was the case in one of our examples in the public procurement by Stockholm County. They actually procured the core competence in buying the kind of delivery role within the organization. They gave that to a private provider, so they kind of give away all control over cost and quality to an external provider. We also think that Swedish authorities could increase their consideration of using a functional procurement and public-private partnerships, which have the potential to be more flexible, and also use the opportunity to communicate and negotiate with potential suppliers. And I will come back to that. We also need to extend the opportunity to consider past performance in supplier selection. We also had a survey. So should I increase my speed? Yeah.
Yes, a little bit. We are running out of time. We are very short on time. So if you can wrap up, please.
Yeah, I will wrap up. So we also had a survey to public procurement practitioners, and to our surprise, they think that the first phase is the most important to kind of safeguard quality, but they invest the least time in that. The final phase, they think, are also important, but this is the one that almost get the kind of least amount of time. And this is also to do with the organization of the procurement. Now we are pretty distant from the ones that actually do the procurement auction and where the delivery happens. And I think that the most important kind of takeaway from the realization phase is that cost overruns can be good and bad. Whether or not you have a kind of decent treatment of the bad cost overruns, it has to do with the contract design. And we think that cost-sharing contracts must be used to a larger extent than they are. And also, we think that Sweden or other countries should implement a national rating system for bad and good deliveries, so that we don't throw away information. So we can kind of use the reputation mechanism in an organized way when we allocate contract to public providers. And the main conclusions in briefs are those on the screen. I will not read them out loud because that takes a lot of time, but the conclusions that we make, the kind of recommendations that are in the report, what they have in common is that they create incentives to deliver at least stipulated quality. That is what it is all about. And if we do that, we can get more efficient procurement from an economic perspective, we think, without jeopardizing the legality of the procurement process. We can still kind of follow the regulation.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you, Sophia, and sorry for rushing you there.
No, but you're good. That's perfect. Thank you.
Great. So let's move swiftly on over to Janne Tukiainen. Please, Janne, share your thoughts and comments.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sophia and team, for this excellent report. It was a pleasure, and obviously agree with pretty much everything in the report, being a fellow economist specialized in public procurement, so it was fantastic. Let me try to just comment on the sort of main conclusions in the interest of time instead of details of the analysis. And the first main conclusion is that these reputation mechanisms could and should be activated in public procurement, and I totally agree. It is a great suggestion. It's a clear policy tool. The key issue is that a lot of relevant quality in public procurement is non-contractable, and it's hard to write terms and conditions and that that the supplier would follow through with all kinds of quality we care about. But a lot of this quality will be revealed when the users actually use the services and goods. And these reputation mechanisms then provide incentives for the supplier to perform well, also in the quality dimensions we cannot control for in the contract. And this has really, in economics, very solid theoretical and empirical support, mostly by Giancarlo Spagnolo and co-authors in many articles. And interestingly, I think it would have support also from the field. We run a recent conjoint survey experiment to Finnish and German public procurement officials, asking their preferences over various tender outcomes. And the thing that they cared by far the most is sort of avoiding a firm that they had bad experiences with to be the winner. And therefore, I think the public procurement officials would really value this reputation system because it would allow them a legal way to sort of avoid these bad experience firms. And these public procurement officials also in our survey thought there is too much regulation, and maybe sort of we have to think how to navigate through the EU regulation to make it feasible to install this kind of reputation mechanism. But I think it's a great idea. Other concerns some have had with this reputation mechanism is that maybe it will decrease competition. And we also already know that competition is pathologically low in public procurement, both in Finland, Sweden, and elsewhere. So we have to be careful that this reputation system will not create sort of incumbents with too much market power to sort of deter further entry. And this the report by Sophia and others makes the correct proposal in the sense that we can give new entrants the average score of the other bidders, but actually if we worry about competition, and Spagnolo's work says that we could be even higher than the average. We could even give the maximum number of quality to new, but it sort of depends on the conditions on how much we care about competition and how much not. But anyway, details to be ironed out, but I'm strongly in support of this reputation system for sure, and I've been proposing it myself also in several pieces. So it would be amazing. The second main conclusions of the sort of that was picked up especially in the press release, I guess are kind of similar. There was this one point that cost overrun should be managed in the contract. One proposition was to use so-called cost-sharing contracts, meaning that we could avoid this 5-time increase in the price of building a bridge by making the supplier to share in some of the risk of the cost overrun and not have them all within the buyer. And in Finland, we have usually these are called like elinkaarimalli, for example. And I think it's an excellent idea, and I have been saying that before in the media, so I'm not going to change my mind now. Of course, we have to be careful in what types of contract it's useful and what not, as Sophia and those wrote. But in principle, it should be used more. And a related thing to these cost overruns is the problem that if the tender price is not reflected in the final price, it creates strong incentives to cheat, as they write in the report. And there are also anecdotes of this in Finland. For example, one bidder told me that, why would we want to increase competition? If you make it more intensive, I just lie more and I will take my fair markup in cost overruns anyway. So, if we don't, this sort of lack of connection between the tender price and the final price will also deteriorate our efforts in increasing competition to be effective. But I think something that the report maybe kind of missed is that actually this reputation mechanism could also address these price concerns. If you go way over the promised price, you would also get a negative penalty for that. And therefore, this would sort of again align the interests. And more broadly in the cost overruns, I think they're likely to be a major concern. And we have a lot of these anecdotes of something costing 10 times more than it was promised, especially in construction. But we don't really know the exact magnitude. For example, in Finland, we don't systematically collect data on the cost overruns. And I think we should. For example, in this recent VNTEAS piece by Merisalo and co-authors, they recommend that our Hilma e-service system should collect data over the entire procurement life cycle. And I couldn't agree more. We really need systematic information on every single procurement, on what was the final price paid, not only the bidding price paid. And this would be amazingly useful to both policymakers and research to understand the extent of the problem. Then I have picked a couple of arguments, not all the arguments in the report, but a couple of other arguments. One was this Sophia's point that procurements have become fewer and larger, indicating that we have sort of over-focus on the administrative costs of the buyers. And I do totally agree. Also, in my experience, we have sort of too much weight public procurement officials place on their own administrative costs, their own bureaucratic concerns, and the legal considerations, not enough on economics and taxpayers' welfare, including minimizing suppliers' costs, which would be tremendously more efficient than minimizing buyers' costs, because minimizing suppliers' costs would also be tremendously helpful in increasing competition. And the gains from competition, given the vast amounts of money involved, are just of order of magnitude larger than anything we can do in the administrative costs of the buyer side. And I think there are many things we could do to increase competition. Let me point out one interesting recent paper by Vítězslav Titul, who studied a regulation in Czech Republic. For 2 years, they required that the auction had at least 2 bidders before the thing would be bought. Very simple tool to address lack of competition. We have many auctions with only 1 bidder. So they required at least 2, and it worked amazingly well. It decreased prices by almost 10%. They tend to get 2 bidders instead of 1 or 0, and this didn't come at the cost of failing to buy stuff. And how they achieved is that actually there were behavioral changes in the buyer side. They had longer times to bid more detailed contracts and so forth. So very simple policies can actually address this, just 4 bid auctions with 1 bidder only. Also, joint production is very useful to study, and there's a current VNTEAS project that we will study it also now in Finland. There's a lot of studies in Italy that it can work very well, but less in sort of Nordic countries. Before I finish, let me quickly comment also on the secondary objectives part. I think Sophia is right in saying that they should be used only selectively and with a lot of clarity. And I think this is something where we have a gap in the knowledge in the research side, because we haven't collected systematic information on which auctions or procurements have secondary objectives related to innovation or environment or labor markets. Potentially, there are some studies showing that they can change the amount of things ongoing, but there are many potential costs, like less competition, both in the short run and the long run. There could be just some greenwashing instead of actual environmental impact. And one question I'm interested in when is public procurement contract large enough to actually encourage real investment in innovation and being green instead of just hand waving around this single small contract. So there's a lot we want to know more about this green innovation and green procurement. I know both Sophia and me are working on these topics.
Thank you, Janne. I have to stop you there. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Let's go over to Tarja Sinivuori-Bolt and comments from the governmental perspective.
Thank you, Johanna. So I'm Tarja Sinivuori-Bolt from the Ministry of Finance, and my responsibilities there are mainly with developing public procurement, so not with the legislation. For that, we have the responsibilities by the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment. But thank you very much for the interesting report and for the presentation, Sophia. The report offers a lot of food for thought. And thank you for inviting me here to share the views today and be part of the discussion. And there was so much interesting things in the report that I think I will really share that with my colleagues in Finland, and we will dig deeper in it. And there were so many issues which I would like to address, but as I have promised to discuss as well the developments in Finland, so I will be brief to stay within my time slot. But to start with, I think, like for a long time in the public procurement, the focus was mainly in the detailed and difficult legislation. And nowadays, there's so much more issues to talk about, and it's nice when the focus has shifted from the tendering stage to this more broad approach of end-to-end public procurement, like you had these 3 phases on your slides, and that makes this is a good development to go more to this broad approach, how we look at the public procurement. And also there are the issues like sustainability, both environmental and social, and the things like data management and the contract management and innovation to take in regard. So all in all, it is great to have the interest of the academia and the chance then to learn from these studies. And of the many interesting issues, the chapter, not everything should be procured, brought a lot of thoughts in my mind. Because in Finland, we often tend to think that by procuring from outside, we might get more efficiency and maybe to make sure we don't lack the innovation from the private sector. And last summer, we had a study made about the total volume of Finnish public procurement, which was 47 million. And what was interesting in that study was that around 1/3 of that was outside of the scope of public procurement legislation, because being in-house. And then somehow it's not the official view of Ministry of Finance, but I just think that if we would do more in-house, it would also result that we have a huge public sector in Finland, in the Finnish economy. And it is already a big part of our economy, the public sector. So I don't think for the efficiency reasons, would it be then good to expand that really? But it would be really interesting to have a clear understanding what would be the optimal situation. And then as well, the chapter, the pros and cons of joint procurement, was very interesting topic as well. And in Finland at the moment, we are planning to take a closer look in the pros and cons of the framework agreements and the dynamic purchasing systems run by central purchasing bodies. We would like to have a study made on the economics of scale and the procurement and the transaction costs. But it depends largely, of course, on the issue. Do we have enough rich data available? And the costs of the supply side would as well be interesting to see if there's something what we can learn and get on us. But yeah, even though there was many interesting topics in the report to discuss, but I have promised to share today as well with you the view of the Ministry of Finance of the current situation and developments in Finland in the field of public procurement. And therefore I have 2 slides, which I shall try to run through really quickly and keep my on the clock. So we launched in Finland our first national public procurement strategy in September 2019. And as you see here, the goals are very similar to the Swedish ones, so they are familiar for you, so nothing new there. So it's not like we have pulled a rabbit out of the hat or anything, but what we would like to share with you is the very comprehensive way we are working with these goals to achieve a systemic change in public procurement in Finland. And therefore we have established a program called Procure Finland, Hankintoihin in Finnish, and that was launched together with the Association of the Finnish Municipalities, make sure that we have the whole public sector on board. So each of these 8 common goals, what you see here in the national strategy, they have we have built a large thematic group working on these themes. And the groups are always led by 2 persons, one from the relevant ministry and one from the municipal side. And in these groups, we have large number of people from contracting authorities, from state and municipal sides, and private companies, academics, and people from different expert organizations. And this structure is just to make sure that we are focusing on the right things and we are planning the right support for the contracting authorities to achieve our common goals. And so we don't want to do only development work through the eyes of the ministries or the political goals or the administration, but we want to have these larger people involved. And these 8 common goals, they are very much, of course, in interaction with each other, and therefore working towards them in coordinated manner helps them to find the synergies and recognize all the overlappings with different development work, what we can do. And we have wanted to make this easy view, so we have kind of grouped them like color coded, and there is this dark blue area, and these are the things that have to do with the process of the contracting authorities, where they have to pay attention and learn more. And then there is the light blue area, which is kind of the very core, like how to make sure that the contracting authorities, they get what they need, and how to get the companies on board, and how to take care that the services really match then the end users' needs. And then the green is this sustainability, where we can only reach if we really succeed on other areas. And of course, in addition to these 8 common goals, we have concrete measures planned and executed, and we have a plan to monitor the results, but I will not go into these in this short time. But instead, I would like to show you still quickly one more slide of our operative engine, Keino network. And on this slide, you can see all the organizations who are working in this network. And it has been established already a bit earlier, March 2018. And there is the 6 expert organizations who are combining their forces into expert network to work for more innovative and sustainable public procurement in Finland. And it is steered by the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment, alongside with 5 other ministries, one of them being Ministry of Finance. So this we're working very close together on the strategic level in this program, Procure Finland, and in this operational level, in this Keino network. We try to make sure that they really grow together as kind of a killer combination then to deliver a lot of good results. But yes, I think these were my main points I wanted to share with you. And if there is then more time in the end, I'm of course happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Tarja, for those words. Let's move on swiftly to Antti Raimovaara from Mehiläinen. Please, Antti.
Yes, thank you. Please note if my screen sharing works. Is it visible?
No, we can see you.
No?
That's
You
nice
can only
too.
see me. Okay. How about now?
No, unfortunately, still not. So.
Really? I'm sharing desktop.
Maybe we can continue without the slides.
Yeah, we have to do that. Yeah,
that's good.
For some reason it doesn't share. Anyway, so great to be here, and an honor to have a few words about how we in Mehiläinen and in the healthcare services in Finland and deal with the public procurement. So my name is Antti Raimuvaara. I'm account director for public healthcare services with Mehiläinen. A few words about the company, so you know what kind of company I'm representing. We have about 30,000 employees, 700 units, and serve almost every third Finn in healthcare services. Last year, we have about 1.4 billion euro revenue and have been growing quite rapidly, and also expanding our services to other European countries such as Sweden, Estonia, and Germany. Please check meliva.se for the Swedish operations that we have started. Moving on, it was really interesting to read the report, and a few comments about the report before kind of concentrating on three different areas. The reputation system was kind of interesting. I'm thinking about the objectivity that might not be quite clear all the time. That raised some questions. The alternative to the reputation system could be using references from past deliveries that is typically used in healthcare and social care tendering processes. So that basically measures past experience and not that kind of how successful it has been from the procurist's point of view. It's also one point is to measure how the end users will see the quality. It's the NPS index that is measured by text messages, and that gives some sort of figure of how the customers feel about the service. Cost overruns are not typical at all in delivery, service delivery business and in healthcare. So basically the bid price you give in the procurement process is and will be the delivery price. So that's typical for healthcare business. Some characteristics in Finnish public healthcare and social care are that it's highly regulated. I mean the provision of services in both public and private healthcare, because of the patient security. That's of course important to regulate that side. Quality of services is guaranteed by supervising authorities and high quality education of healthcare and social care professionals. So that is typically not a big issue at all in Finland. All the Finns know that social and healthcare reform is ongoing, and in the beginning of next year, the number of responsible parties organizing the services in healthcare and social care will reduce from over 300 to just 21. So that's basically kind of concentrates or reduces the number of the parties who will organize procurement processes as well. In healthcare in Finland, the public pay, public provision is the main combination, and public pay private provision of services is kind of has been increasing over a year, but it's still just quite a small portion of the delivery. In social care, there are much more public pay private provision contracts. The lack of professionals in Finland continues to be really hard, while the demand is increasing at the same time. About the consolidation in healthcare, the degree is relatively high, but in social care, the degree of the consolidation is not that high yet. the 3 points. Procurement strategy is something that I would kind of, as a representative for private sector, see kind of to be used kind of more systematically, because there is kind of typically benefits for both sides. And if a more strategic approach for procurement would be used, that would lead in many good end results. So you should consider acquiring rare skills or non-core skills or services, rather than just make a procurement because of lack of resources. High performance or high effectiveness of the services by specialized suppliers is one thing to consider. A balance on resources and acquire flexibility because of demand variability is something that could be used more widely. And consider also establishing development and investment partnerships in healthcare. In social care, that is a bit more in use already. The second point is very important, that the dialogue between the buyer and the seller should be more frequent. It should start much earlier, so that the open discussion and understanding the drivers and motives of both parties so that they will lead to optimum result. Lack of information, uncertainties, transferring risks to supplier, and overly high requirements will definitely lead to increased costs. So basically the uncertainties are seen as risks, which always have a price. Conducting a thorough market dialogue before sending out a tender will typically result in much smoother procurement process starting from the beginning. It will lead to lower costs. It will lead to optimum service level. Basically, that's quality. So not too high requirements, not too low requirements, but the optimum requirements or optimum service level. Then also the discussion and the dialogue would kind of open possibilities to win-win incentives, so that if the supplier succeeds to exceed the expectations, and that basically helps the buyer also, that would be kind of good to open in discussions before the real tender is sent out. The contract with less room for interpretation will definitely be an end result if the dialogue is opened beforehand, and there will be less issues during service provision if the dialogue is open. And the last point here is the importance of the contract. So like known, the devil is in the detail. So if there are kind of uncertain things, there will be also uncertainties in measuring the service, and there are kind of several issues with that the more detailed the tender is, there will be less difficulties in the contract negotiations, and there will be less room for issues with and interpretations of the contract during the service provision phase. When the reporting methods and metrics are mutually agreed and well documented in the contract, it will be much easier to follow up, and there will be much less debate during the delivery phase. So that will lead to better trust and let people focus on the right things rather than reading the contract and arguing about the details in there. And what goes around comes around. If you think something might be unclear or not interpreted the same way, you are probably right. And everybody loves honeymoon, so honeymoon phase lasts longer when the rules are clear for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Antti, for those last words. They were epic already, I think. We have a few minutes for some discussion, and I would actually like to start off by asking Sofia, now when we have heard comments from the Finnish side, and I've seen that you have been writing down on your paper there. So what do you think that we can learn in Finland from the report, or vice versa, you in Sweden, from the comments you've heard here today?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Tarja, Antti, and Janne, for your comments. I feel really privileged to have you as my commenters, and thank you for reading the report and good comments. Well, I think I will start with the vice versa. I think in Sweden we can learn a lot from you. I really enjoyed Tarja's very pedagogical kind of illustration of the public procurement strategy that you have in Finland. I think it reflects a much more focus on efficiency than what I experience I will be a little bit critical to Sweden now, what I experience in Sweden. I think also, we have just currently a suggestion to legalize, to make it mandatory for public procurement authorities to take climate into consideration when allocating contracts in Sweden. That is the specific formulation in the suggested change of the Swedish public procurement law. And when it is appropriate, consider the environment. From a scientific approach, it should be the opposite way around. Environment first and then climate, because public procurement to solve climate issues is, well, it's not that very efficient since climate doesn't have geographical borders. For one reason. So when I look at your strategy, it seems to be much more funded in science than what I see at home, which concerns me a lot. So congratulations to all the researchers in Finland for having such wise politicians that listens to you, at least from what I have heard today. And also, Antti, I think you had some really good points from the business perspective. And Janne, I have noted a lot of recent references that I will definitely download and read. And sorry for not knowing about the study you have from 2021. It looks really interesting. But yes, and also a comment about the rating system. Yes, you could be concerned about the rating system in relation to competition. But what I hear in Sweden, and also which is revealed in some surveys, is that serious firms today decide, well, they choose not to participate in public procurement because of too much focus on low quality and low price. So I think if we kind of introduce a rating system that, as also was pointed out by Antti, create incentives to produce more quality than asked for, that will actually potentially have a positive effect on competition. I think we're losing a lot of good firms today because of the kind of design of it all. So I have a lot to say because this is very interesting, but I will stop there. So thank you, all three of you, for excellent comments.
Great, thank you so much. I would actually like a question to Janne here. We've been talking a lot about here that public procurements are a way to kind of secure the competitive market, and in the report we could read that the extensive collaboration between purchasing entities might actually harm this competition and create less competition in the future. So how do you view this question on collaboration from a Finnish viewpoint?
Well, I guess it's something that, as Tarja said, we are embarking to do research on at the moment. So I cannot yet sort of provide answer based on data and what really happens. But there is a lot of potential for getting some cost savings from these joint procurement actions, because you may benefit from better skills, you may get scale economies, and you may maybe make contracts attractive. Bigger contracts may be more attractive, and therefore you could even introduce more competition. But of course there are trade-offs. So you lose the opportunity to tailor the things you buy to local needs. You may lose local small bidders. So there can be effects going both ways, and it will depend a lot on how in practice you do these things, whether you get the benefits or whether you get the bad outcomes. The existing evidence is mostly from Italy, where there are actually huge benefits typically from these joint procurements. But maybe the Italian environment is very different from from the Nordic environment, for example, larger risks of local corruption and so forth. And maybe the benefits of joint procurement are larger there than in here, but that remains to be seen. Theoretically, it could go either way and will likely depend a lot on the type of contract and how you execute the joint procurement.
So we are still looking for data and trying to get data availability. And you also noted this, Janne, in your comments, that this is something that is looked upon in Finland, and I'm really happy for that. This is a very important topic, but unfortunately we are out of time here. But we have Nicola Klase here on the line now after some technical difficulties. So maybe you, Nicola, would like to say a few ending words, and then we are off for today.
Yes, thank you very much. So I'm very honored to have the possibility to say a few words towards the end of this very interesting presentation of the SNS report on the theme of public procurement. Now, we have clearly heard that efficient public procurement is critical to an efficient social service provision for our citizens in both Sweden and Finland. Now, it's actually quite telling that the Swedish public sector procures goods and services annually in the order of 80 billion euros. In Finland, I believe the number is close to 50 billion euros. Now, both the Swedish and Finnish government, as we've heard today, have national strategies and very much aim to render new ideas in the public sector and the business community, although there are nuances and differences between the two. Now, with the aid of well-functioning competition, our respective governments can actually use public procurement as a tool to improve efficiency and quality in the public sector, while at the same time adhering to both Sweden's and Finland's international obligations within the EU and the WTO and our free trade agreements. A lot is done on public procurements, but as we have learned today, we can always improve the processes and the criteria that affect the results. Finland and Sweden have a lot to gain from working closely together, also when it comes to durable procurements, not least by focusing on the right things, as Tarja Sinnevuori so eloquently put it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicola Klase, for those very last words here. Our time is up today, so I want to thank everyone who has been on the panel and all the speakers. A big thank you to you, and also for all the listeners out there who are participating. Thank you so much, and see you again.